Today, we're talking with Rob LoCascio, founder and CEO of LivePerson since 1995. For those who don't know, LivePerson, or LPSN, is all about making life and communication easier through conversational cloud and AI technology. Rob, welcome to TechTables. I actually interviewed Rob yesterday on my own personal podcast, The Study. So, Rob, we're in, maybe a few other people call it the caring economy. And LivePerson cares for the biggest and best brands by helping to bridge the legacy call centers with the digital world of conversational cloud and intelligent communication. Your customers care so much about their brand's image and status in the marketplace, and every digital touch either makes a better consumer experience or a negative one where those consumers are complaining online, probably on Twitter, about the slow response times. Now, I don't know if you bank with Chase or not, but when the pandemic, yeah, you do. Okay, so during the pandemic, did you see that banner? The banner that was like, don't call us, the don't call us banner.
Yes. That they put on when you logged in. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like, don't call. Yeah. For like, by the way, it was months. They just used the pandemic as a reason not to take calls. Yeah.
Yeah. It was totally crazy. We've got a call. If someone knows Jamie Dimon, by the way, if you listen to Tech Table, someone knows Jamie Dimon, please. We can put Rob LoCascio in front of Jamie Dimon. They need LivePerson. Why do you think it took a pandemic for companies and governments to find, and even some companies still aren't, but to find frictionless ways to leverage automation?
You know, there's this concept of human beings in contact centers, and this is a legacy thinking that we need human beings to take phone calls, and we need them to talk on phones. Even though we're in 2021 and most people are messaging their friends and family, it's like this concept that the people who run these call centers are from 1902. And the bottom line is, it's just legacy thinking. What happened during the pandemic was contact centers got shut down, and there was this mad dash. We grew by 40% on volume between March and April of 2020. And everyone was like, we got to automate, we got to create bots, we got to do all that. So that drove a lot of behavior. It broke a lot of the traditional thinking. And from there, it's continued to go forward. And that's what we're seeing. But it definitely, COVID helped kick it into high gear.
Okay, so COVID helps kick it into high gear. Now we're coming up on, we'll call it almost 2 years. Are you seeing people regress? Do people want to go back to the call centers? What are you seeing from businesses right now?
They're going back. They are going back.
No.
And yeah, and the big thing is, I've been in the business for 20 years in the call center, contact center business. I invented chat back in 97, web chat, and built from there. So I've seen a lot. What you come to realize is that the human in this day and age at a contact center really serves one purpose. There's an intent from a consumer. They're asking for something. And the agent processes it and then goes to some legacy backend system. So a lot of times the issue is just that legacy backend systems don't have the right APIs and access to enable a bot to connect to them. So what happens is a human connecting into 3 or 4 green screen systems. It's extraordinary what can be in a contact center, and they're typing away. Hang on one second, I'm checking your account. We've all been in that. And you're like, I just want to pay my bill. Like, I don't need to talk to you. My bill, I want to pay. It doesn't look right. I want to ask one question about this one thing, and I want to move on and pay. Why do I have to talk to you? Because there's nothing that a human in a contact center can talk to you about that can't be done with a machine. Because very rarely you're saying, what steak restaurant do you eat at in Mumbai? You understand? It's not that thing anymore. And that's the problem, is a lot of times the people who run contact centers see it as like a relationship person. And we see them as conversationalists. We actually believe that they can be better at building bots than anything else, doing calls and stuff like that.
I mean, obviously, it's a really great insight. I personally think my generation, I'm a little bit younger than you. Yeah, it's not a relationship piece. Like, I'm not looking to have a relationship with American Express. As nice as they want to call me or Chase or whatever, whoever it is, we want to get the information and then move on to the next piece that we want to do. I read a really great story, I think case study on how LivePerson, I forget in which country, but basically you were taking these call centers and saying, okay, you know what? We're going to move from the call center to enabling these folks to be actually creating chatbots. So they're earning more money. And I'm totally blanking on what country it is.
It's Dominican Republic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Did you want to just maybe tell that story? I thought it was a really great story about how not only is it empowering the staff that's there, but obviously you're getting better automation and you get a slightly human aspect behind the scenes also.
Yeah, we were working with this contact center. They were originally chat reps from 6 or 7 years ago. Then we moved them to doing messaging. We do asynchronous messaging. That's what we do today. And then I remember I flew down there personally, and we had just bought a technology to start. This is about 3.5, 4 years ago, to start our focus on automation and what we call bots. And I went down there and sat with the agents and said, go play with the tool. Let me see you play with this tool. And I could see it was very cumbersome. And it was like most bot building platforms, they're like schematics. There's like a flow chart. That's how they build. And that's just not the way you build conversations. Like conversations like poetry to me. You got to think of it like a piece of poetry. And so they were finding it really hard. So I said, what type of an interface would you like? How would you build a conversation? And they basically said, we'd like to type it out like a piece of poetry. And I would do this and I would do that. So I had my engineering team with me, the people who were building the technology, and we sat for about 5 days with them. And we started to even look at how they converse, how they feel people out. Like in this case, it was one of our home improvement companies. They're selling products on their website, like an outdoor grill. Let me tell you what you have to do to sell an outdoor grill. And then I split the cohorts between women agent and men agents. I want to see how women and men differently. So we really did a lot of research on it. What we ended up seeing was that these are the best conversationalists in the world. They're better conversational designers than a technical person or a data scientist. And so we wanted to build a tool that we could put into their hands, which we ended up doing. And fast forward, they ended up building bots. They ended up becoming bot makers. They doubled their salaries, and they drove this one customer. We went from like 100 million in incremental revenue to 500 million in incremental revenue because they built thousands of bots on their website, selling outdoor grills, all sorts of things. So we proved, and Bloomberg did a mini documentary down there, like a 5-minute thing. And at the end of it, the woman from the contact center says, why can't the DR be an AI center of the world? And that was what we were trying to do, is like AI should be everywhere. AI should be empowering, not disempowering. And that's really the journey we took. And that's how our platform works today.
I love that. I love what you said about conversations are like poetry. That's going to be a great micro video clip. I just love that phrase, conversations are like poetry. And we're going to link to the Bloomberg in the show notes for those. I think that's really great. The Bloomberg kind of mini 5-minute clip. Talk about how LivePerson makes it easier to leverage the agility and scalability of the cloud to deploy its conversational cloud and AI technology.
Yeah, it's funny. I look back, I was talking to someone who knows the company for a long time, and he was saying, like, I think you guys are the first cloud provider, because in 97, we started hosting software. We decided not to do enterprise software, like shrink wrap software. So we've been doing it like this for a while. And it originally started because we knew if we wanted to do something new, and at that point, chat was new, and companies didn't know if it was going to work or not on a website. Websites were new. And so buying a piece of software, installing it was just a hassle. So we created a way to host it and put it on the site. Fast forward to where we are today, the Conversational Cloud, which is our cloud that we run. If you can imagine, it gives you the power of AI, truly the power to build conversational AI at a very high quality and handle millions of consumers, and the scale of it and the security of it, like how we secure our data. And the bottom line is we provide that in a very easy way to get. You can be up and running in a day. Most large enterprises, I mean, the biggest banks and telcos will take 8 weeks, 12 weeks to be totally up live, trained agents, built bots, deployed bots, automations. All of that is happening on the platform. So it's a very powerful cloud because it's very specific for conversational AI.
Yeah, that's really great. Now, I don't want to prove myself too much from yesterday's podcast, but I'd been following Rob and LivePerson since 2008, 2009. I was going on websites and seeing LivePerson. This is just a web chat back in the day. And I'm thinking, this is really great. I wish I would have had the foresight. I think I was a little young, but I wish I would have still had the foresight to see where the cloud was going to go and where you were taking that. But I've caught your vision with Jim Cramer. You've been on a number of times on Mad Money, and just this space is exploding. Even just right now, you see it with what Azure and Google Cloud and just the growth in cloud alone. It's like growing 50% a quarter. It's insane. Like the growth is just like the TAM just keeps expanding. I think that's where LivePerson's at too, where the TAM just keeps expanding. I don't think it was rare, but it is a little bit rare where, okay, we think this is our total addressable market, and then it just keeps growing. And I think that's what LivePerson, especially with the conversational cloud and AI technology, you won't be able to run from automation. It's coming. And you can say some of it's here, maybe kind of some companies and governments and cities want to move back, but it's coming. And how can you leverage a company like LivePerson to get out and serve more of your customers, more of your citizens, et cetera? I love it.
Yeah, we're growing at 27% a year on $500 million in revenue, and our growth rate's just been really strong because you're right. Digital became more demanding. The interesting thing is that digital up until COVID was a failure, unless you're Amazon, because I'm talking about actually e-commerce, because e-commerce, when I started the company in 95, we expected e-commerce by now, 20 something years later, to be more than now it's 20 something percent of commerce. It was like 12% of commerce going into COVID. So there was a big explosion during COVID because people couldn't go to stores and everything, and it continues. So it's just really interesting because there's still, once again, this legacy thinking, although COVID changed that. If COVID didn't happen, we'd probably still be on the same trajectory, which you would have Amazon owns 50% of commerce in the US. The rest is divided up by small players, so forth and so on.
Yeah, you said digital was a failure, and I think you're spot on. There was this phrase, it's still not dead yet, but digital transformation. And it was the biggest buzzword before the pandemic. Everyone was talking about how they had this digital transformation plan. And then COVID hit, and suddenly, oh, I guess I didn't really have a plan. Like we just said we were a digital company. And then COVID happens, and then you start really figuring out. It was really when the pandemic happened, you almost crossed the Rubicon where it was like, all right, we really have to go forward. Like we're not digital. Everyone's working from home. Every knowledge worker is working from home. And I still think even today, certain companies still are not embracing digital. Like they might say, hey, we implemented DocuSign, so now we're paperless. And I'm like, that's just a very small piece in a larger ecosystem of how you can really make your business or city or government digital. And I think there's probably a huge market for LivePerson, especially I interview a lot of CIOs on the state and city level where I'm trying to think how fast LivePerson can deploy their technology because governments tend, not all, but tend to run a lot slower. I think the theme of whatever you want to call it in the digital space still has a lot of runway, especially as companies are trying to walk back. I think it's going to be really great. Rob, can you just maybe jump into some specific case studies that you might have that are public, of course, around some of the wins that you've had at LivePerson?
Yeah, there's been some interesting ones. Go back to COVID, like Chipotle. People weren't coming into their restaurants. And so we created a bot called Pepper, and you can configure and build a burrito and go in and get the burrito at the door. And so think about it, they were just sitting there and they need a way to configure, do all this stuff. They have a website, by the way, they have an app, but we brought all this onto Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and Apple Business Chat. So any messenger platform you can just go on. It was very frictionless. So there's ones like that. One of the big jewelry companies in the country, the largest, have 3,000 stores, Signet Jewelers, and they own Zales and all these companies. They also, once again, shut down their stores and people were trying to buy rings. And so they were even like, can we even sell a diamond ring, an engagement ring like this? And it doesn't really work as much online. We have it online. We have a website. We've had it for years, but the stores is where we get most of our revenue. Digital became like a major part. And the CEO, I remember she was on Kramer and she was talking about how digital really works and it's amazing. And they're selling rings and they're building. The thing about conversational commerce, which is different than an app, is that it's really two pieces. One is conversing with somebody allows true personalization. You're listening to them. We all know that listening is the best way to sell. And on a website, we don't listen because we don't have the ability to. So if you can listen and respond, this is very powerful. And the second part of it is you can create your own experience. Most websites all look the same. Google set the rules. Google said if you need a top nav, content here, bottom nav, and if you don't have it the way we want it, you don't get indexed for SEO. And they created like Louis Vuitton looks like Walmart. It's crazy. Like Ferrari looks like Ford, like the websites. And so this allows you to create truly an experience that aligns to your brand. Pepper is the bot of Chipotle. So the Cosmopolitan Hotel created an automation, and what's the name of it? Heather or something. You check in, you can see there's a video on YouTube and she stays with you. And it's racy, the whole thing. It's very Vegas-y. And then she cuts the line at the club and has a special drink from the bartender if you ask the bartender. And they created this whole experience around it that you would never be able to do with a website.
Yeah. I love that. I love the Pepper example from Chipotle. I love Chipotle. If anyone knows the CEO of Chipotle, I would love to have him on. I love Chipotle. That would be amazing. I ordered many times through, so I've contributed orders through the app, loyal Chipotle customer. No, this is great. I think another one was T-Mobile. Are they a customer or did I
Yeah,
just make that up?
that was our first customer. We went live with them 4.5 years ago, and we pioneered the whole messaging. We didn't even have automation at the time, just to go asynchronous messaging in app. I remember the day we went live with that, we weren't sure if people were going to use messaging, and they didn't promote it, they didn't do anything, and boom, people started to use it. And what was really interesting, I'll tell you a funny story. The power of asynchronous is you can message like you message your friends and family. And so you message and maybe you're going to go do something and you come back to it as a consumer. You're not being put on hold or you're holding on a phone call talking, which is annoying. I remember within the first weeks, I get a call from the guy at T-Mobile who was running the project, and he says, "You'll never believe what just happened." I said, "What?" He goes, "An agent was messaging a consumer and it was going on. And the agent said, 'Look, I have to go on my lunch break. Do you mind if I finish this up after my lunch break? I'll message you back.'" And the consumer said, "No, no problem. Enjoy your lunch break." So think of this, because the consumer knew I'm connected. I don't have to recall. I don't have to go chase you down. And so the person went to lunch, came back, started the message up, finished the person's problem. Wasn't anything critical, but that would never happen in a voice call. Like, "Hey, I got to take a lunch break." Ting, hang up. So it just shows you the power of the asynchronous communication.
Yeah, I love that. This is a very interesting question. I found that people are often resistant to asynchronous communication. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's like kind of this whole Slack world where you Slack somebody and then they expect you to respond in 5 seconds. But what do you think is behind that resistance to asynchronous communication? And then how do you think we can kind of maybe get over that hump?
I don't think there's any. We're doing it with our friends and family. I mean, you're texting all the time,
Yeah.
and it's asynchronous. So I think there's expectations, and especially in the technology. If you don't build the technology, and what happened is we've had people that took chat systems. Although I invented chat, I knew it doesn't work as an asynchronous platform. It's built for sessions. And if you don't have the session, it closes itself. You have to start over, especially the contact center guys who had chat. They started to say, "Oh, we have asynchronous." And they don't. They try to fake it. So you have to really give feedback loops to the consumer. Unlike a friend where you message them, they'll get back to me. In a contact center, you've got this heightened sense of, because you've been trained, like, where are they? So you have to have a bot say, "Hey, I'm here. Give me a couple minutes," or it could be 2 minutes, it could be whatever, but I'm going to be with you. No problem. I'll ping you back so you're not staying on hold. And once you have these automations, you reduce that initial stress from the consumer.
Yeah, love that. So typically in the enterprise space, folks tend to move slower at adoption. We've already hinted on this. Are you seeing a shift in the mentality at all? Almost 2 years. We know some folks are coming back, but do you think there will be that lasting shift in the enterprise space?
Yeah, it's happening. We see it. There's demand. There's a lot of action in our industry right now. There's a lot of startups coming in. There's just a lot of action around messaging. So I think it's definitely here to stay. There's action in it. There's definitely still this idea of traditional voice. Now we're releasing voice first half of next year. We're going to put out our own voice platform. And it's fully built into our current platform. So it'll enable voice now, not agent voice, although we'll have that capability. It's really the high quality automated bots, like you're really talking to them, and because some people still call. And we want to cut that off. So when they call, we'll offer an automation by voice. So we are bringing voice to complete the channels. We also do social integrations with all the social platforms. We have all the endpoints of messaging platforms. We have in-app, web. We do have voice to messaging. So we have a lot of ways in which you can get to it, but we are adding voice into the platform.
Yeah, that's great. LivePerson's really meeting the customer wherever they are. You can integrate into anything, which is fantastic. That's like the core of the API ecosystem, which is great. I was listening to a podcast that you were on as I was prepping for this, and you had said, "What is the virus asking us to change?" I didn't think about that, but I thought that was a really great question to ask yourself. And so I was curious, has your answer evolved from the early days of the pandemic, almost 2 years later?
Yes. So first, I put that on my wall so that when I'm talking to people in the company, they could see that phrase, because I've been through two other macro events. I lived through the dot-com, implosion, which had really affected my company, and then 9/11, because I was in New York City. So I put those together in 2001. Although they were separate events, they were macro events outside your control to a certain degree. Although the dot-com, I was within it, but still. And then the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, and now this thing. Each time what I learned is that we're not victims. We're not victims of this thing. We're being asked to change and we're not changing quick enough. And the hand of God, whatever you think about, is you guys got to move it along and you're just not moving it along. So when I put that on my wall, what I wanted to really ask myself and have people ask me, what is it asking us to change? Because it's asking us to change something. Basically, the animals were put back in their cages into our homes, locked up, and given some time to think about life. So you can see some of the things that happened. We became very focused on an injustice, this injustice with people and all things that were happening with Black Lives Matter and the Asian community and APEC community and all this. Like, you could see there was a heightened focus on, like, why is there this disparity between people, humans thinking? The second one was the environment. Like, something's going on, and there was a heightened sense of the environment. Like, these viruses spread because of environmental issues. We get a sense of what are we doing to the nature around us. And the third one that came out of it is how we work and how we have a relationship with the business as employees. That one is most fascinating to me, and it has evolved because I became very focused on crypto during this period of time. And I started to look into blockchain and the companies and their technologies and meeting with a lot of interesting people like Joe Lubin, who's one of the original Ethereum guys. And they started to shape my thinking about what they call a DAO, distributed autonomous organization. And when you think about Bitcoin, if you know something about it or not, there's no employees. It's one of the biggest brands on earth right now. Think about it. Bitcoin is one of the largest brands on earth. And yet there's not a head of marketing. There's no CEO. There's no founder that we know of. Now, we know there's some Satoshi's a founder, but we don't know who he is. And yet there's people who are making billions of dollars, millions of dollars, whatever it is, by working on this technology in a community. And the rewards are built into the work, what we call mining in this case. I have a server, I do some stuff, and I get a coin if some things happen. It's a longer conversation, but it started to make me think about the DAO, the idea that people don't work for a company, but they make money and they're able to live anywhere they want, and they're able to connect in when they want, is probably the future of how we're going to build companies. And I don't think my children, who are 3 and 5 and 9 months old, I don't believe that they will work in a company. They will work in a DAO. Also, blockchain came from the financial crisis. Crypto started in the financial crisis. This is a midpoint for it in that its basic tenets are through community, we build sovereignty, which I call a social sovereign. So through community, we build sovereignty. We get greater ownership over our life. That's what people want now. They don't want to work for a company and get a 9-to-5 job. They want greater ownership over their life, their health, their finances, government. Then what you're seeing is a struggle. You're seeing this struggle. And there's a technology platform called blockchain, which is hopefully there to usher us forward.
You're right. That is an entirely separate podcast. I love everything that you said. I think we're just going to have to almost like table that. This is like a 3-hour discussion.
Yes.
But I love everything that you just said. You hear often like the future of work, but I love everything you said about the DAO and just the distributed nature. And that's exactly where this is going. And blockchain's that underlying technology. And right, governments, China has now blocked. I think they're blocking certain, I'm not too deep into it, but I know they're blocking Bitcoin and a few others. And there's a certain access to freedom that certain countries are allowing and certain countries aren't. And so you're seeing that struggle and that divide that's happening right now, exactly as you were talking about.
It's a decentralized system. You cannot get rid of a decentralized system. There's no one you can't go after them. Now, China said we're banning the mining of Bitcoin. And so what did the Bitcoin miners do? Said, no problem. We don't need you chasing us around because that is physical location. We're going to move to the United States and to Kazakhstan. And like now the US is they went from being number 5 or whatever, now we're the largest Bitcoin, which by the way is also driving alternative energy because Bitcoin miners look for cheap energy. And so they're capping gas flares. They're investing in alternative energy. Bitcoin will drive more alternative energy usage than an EV, than electronic vehicles. People don't realize there's a behavior happening in the world around. So all I would say is that if you're a technologist, you're in technology, go down the rabbit hole because you'll find a world down there for you.
Yeah, a world.
And a community.
Yeah. I love that. Do you follow Anthony Pompliano?
Yeah, sure.
The Pomp. Yeah. Someone early on got me turned on to him. I think at first it was Twitter, and then he's got his Substack, and he's got a number of really great interviews. And so
yeah, he's great.
Yeah. Okay, so actually I was wrapping up with the future of work, but I love this future of the company topic. I don't know I haven't framed it like that in my head before. There's a lot of stuff around the future of work that people have put out there, but I haven't actually really explored this distributed model of the future of the company, which now I'm like, I might go down the rabbit hole right after this podcast at 5:45 a.m. in California, and my wife's still sleeping. And before we get to the just distributed model, as LivePerson is where it is right now, where do you see the hybrid model working at LivePerson? How are you retaining top talent? Your thoughts around that?
Look, they call it the great resignation. There's a great migration going on. That's all that's happening. A couple of things are very disturbing. I've been through this a long time. Like during the dot-com, we paid people and like salaries inflated. And there's behavior going on right now that's worse than I've seen in my entire life. And in my industry, people get paid a lot of money. We pay people a lot of money, and we've minted a lot of millionaires in the company because we have equity. And if you do well, the company grows. But there's an inflation going on right now, and there's this talent war going on, and people are getting $10 million sign-on bonuses. I hear all these things, and we have to be careful because we're supposed to be missionaries, not mercenaries. We're building a company of missionaries, and you have to be very careful because you can start building a company of mercenaries. And remember, if that's the way it works out, you can only pay as much as you can pay, and somebody may pay more, and that should not be good enough to take someone out of a company. It should be that they're on a mission with you and they're there for a different reason, to grow as a person and to connect to the vision of the company. It's going to get very blurry, the lines right now. So I think that's a challenge. We hired 316 people in the last 90 days into the company. So there are a lot of people coming. There's a lot of people going. I think 200 people went out. So it was like, we're in a change. We're hiring a lot of people. We brought in some new leaders. We're like taking the company to another place. But I think, what do people want? We closed 22 offices during the pandemic. I didn't want to open them ever again. We opened 5 of them. Here in New York, we opened an office. We have 200 people in New York or so. The office holds 60, 10 to 15 people come in a day. So we're seeing this out in Seattle. We're seeing these different places. So people don't want to commute. We know all this stuff. Probably don't have to talk about that. But once again, I don't think we cracked the nut on the relationship. I don't think any of us cracked the nut on what's the real relationship. What is the contract between a person who works at the company and the company? And not to harp on the DAO, but if you look at the DAO has the contract, it's about rewards are tied to work, and you have freedom. You can live anywhere, live nowhere. You can subscribe to a government or don't subscribe to a government. What I'm seeing right now, I'm living right now over in Italy with my family for the year. And very interesting over there. Look at Portugal. I was in Lisbon for LizCon, which is the big crypto conference. Extraordinary what's going on in Lisbon. They put zero tax down on crypto. They made it like you can come there tomorrow, get an easy visa. Europe was always hard to get a visa, easy to get a visa. I got a 5-year visa in Italy. They just want people to show up who have means, who can work, who can provide to their economies. I don't know if you saw, they just passed a law in Portugal where they're saying you can't text an employee after hours because they know the digital world works very differently, and they're trying to create some boundaries for digital world. These are progressive nations. You would say, like, how could Portugal be a progressive nation over the US? It is. We've got to get our act together here and start to think about the digital person and the DAO life, and not that there's this contract, a fake contract between company and employee about your work, because that contract got broken a long time ago. Like, you don't get pensions anymore. No one works for one company their entire life. So the contract was broken and was never substituted with anything else except work for us, we'll pay you, and commute to work, which is not good enough for people.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good stuff there. The defining relationship piece, I think, is really fascinating because you see this period where, and you went through it a number of times, there's a dot-com bubble, financial crisis, and then here we are with COVID in your company, redefining, paying people $10 million. It just almost becomes this commodity transaction. And you said it perfectly, mercenary. Yeah, money isn't the prime asset in life as much as people maybe think it is. It's not. And you can't build a team by just offering the most money. You see it, like, I'm a basketball coach, so I love it. You see the NBA teams flush cash, but it doesn't work. Maybe very rarely you win the title, but business is different than sports. Business, you compete 24/7. Sports, you compete one game, 2 hours, and then eventually there's like a final piece. But in business, you have to continually compete. So how do you effectively build a team together? Obviously, people love to be compensated, but how do you build a team that's just more than money? And so you're probably pouring into leaders. Those leaders are obviously like pouring into people so that they can actually retain talent. So I think that's like a really fascinating conversation. I didn't actually know that you were living in Italy for the year. I'm going to go tell my wife right now. My wife spent 6 months in Italy when she went to college, and I've been like dying to go. The pandemic kind of definitely put that on hold, but now I'm like a little bit jealous, Rob. I'm like, I need to get over to Italy.
My wife's Italian, family's in Italy, and so I work anywhere. So figure put the kids in to learn Italian, and that's the power of it. Now, I've only been in Italy half the time because I'm on the road. I still travel a tremendous amount,
Yeah.
and then I'm doing my calls and everything from there when I'm there. So I still live the life I need to live. But for my family, it allows them to connect. My wife's roots are there, and my kids are learning Italian. They're in all Italian schools. So that's a powerful thing. Once again, people can live anywhere and work anywhere, and versus I've always been committed to coming to an office. So I'm not working any differently. I'm sorry, I can't work less than I am. I'm not sitting there. Oh, Italy, I get to take off from 12:30 to 2 during the day. I work. I think it's like silly. I think Italy's got a lot of structural problems when it comes to work, and they're going to get manhandled by Portugal, who's
Yeah.
being very progressive on thinking through what a digital nomad is. We're not nomads anymore. These are digital families. So they've got to come up to speed and become more progressive on how they think. They've got to change, or they're going to be left behind. And the US too. Interesting perspective from being in Europe is I'm constantly, obviously, I'm connected to the United States deeply. I'm looking at news in the US. And I just think it's so funny because over there's not a big debate about vaccines, for instance. Like there's 80% of people vaccinated. You have to have a vax card to go eat. There wasn't a big debate, North versus South, liberals versus conservatives. And in America, one of the things like just a debate all day over stuff, just debating. And it's just energy.
Mm-hmm.
Why Portugal is 90% of people are vaccinated. They're just trying to create a digital country. They had problems during the financial crisis of almost going under as a country. And they're like, we're going to take this as an opportunity to change. And we're stuck in this world, which could be reflected on our companies. A lot of what the power is in the United States and a lot of what we think about is centralized power. Google, Facebook, Amazon. And even as a CEO of a public company, I've been trained to think like winner takes all. This is a very American thing, okay? Not to say every country isn't like this, but it's hyper in here. That's why we got the largest centralized companies in the world are in this country. Great. The problem is centralized power over time just can corrupt. And I just think if my company, I want to have the best company in the world. I want to share it. I want to create something in which it builds community, builds profits for many people. And that's what I think will attract the best talent in the world. If I want to get the best people here, they got to believe I'm coming into a community, a place that is in servitude to something better. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because that was the shift during COVID. Like I said, people were looking at the injustice among people, the environment, how I work. What is this about? It's about I want to be in a place of servitude, which goes back to my original comment about hiring mercenaries over missionaries. You can't build a place of servitude when you have mercenaries. They don't work there. So I'm at a crossroad because I'm competing to get the best talent in the world.
I'm just digesting everything you just said. The company that sponsors TechTables, Nagaro, is like a global technology services company. And I've never asked the question on the design side, all of the designers are from Portugal. I was like, that's fascinating. I never actually went deeper. I guess they're talking to some of the designers and the team that they have over there in Portugal and dive a little bit deeper. I didn't realize Portugal is, I don't want to say on fire in a good way, but I'm stuck in the American culture of I live in California and have not really thought. I've traveled to a number of countries, but it's been a couple of years because of the lockdown. But it's so interesting to hear the perspective that you have. I have a little bit of the same perspective. Like I've traveled a lot in the States, even within COVID, between Florida and Texas and in California. And I've actually recorded live podcasts in Texas. And it's a different country than it is in California, like an entirely different country. But I love what you said about Portugal. Even as you think of like talent, where can talent be? This decentralized model, the centralized location of what's happening in the United States. And I know we're actually almost running out of time, so we won't be able to dive that much deeper.
Yeah, but I would tell people one of my things is always to get perspective. It's one of my jobs. Like, and you can't get perspective being stuck in one place.
Yeah.
Travel for me, I've traveled around the world for my whole life. I love traveling because I learn. And we sometimes take a mentality like, so it's okay. I'm in New York actually today. I've been in New York for 3 weeks. And so we have this perspective, New York, center of the world, like the hardest working people are here, blah, blah, blah. Like, obviously, this isn't a tech capital. They're trying to make it. California has more tech capitals, but it's not the center of anything.
Yeah.
It's the center of a few things, just not the center of everything. And so there are things happening in the world that we have to be aware of. And I'm in technology. It's a young business always. It's always young. And if I lose my touch with what's going on in it, then I'm going to lose the company. I won't be able to progress. This is the thing that I try to do, is stay connected to what's happening in the world, the trends, and then where are they happening? Where's the center? Why is it the center?
I love that mindset. Always being young in business, always being young in technology, having that fresh perspective, or you're going to lose your company. And I think that's just a great piece to end on. I think for everyone is like always having that starting kind of mentality. It was almost like when Steve Jobs had left Apple and then started his Pixar journey. You see that kind of almost fresh creativity and energy, and not that you have to leave your company, but having that ability to wake up every day and I think look at it a little bit like a blank canvas, and kind of the world is moving faster today than it ever has before.
Life's a blank canvas. We all have the ability to create the world we want to create. And now that we're not tethered to offices per se, you have to ask yourself, what do I want to do? Where do I want to live? Where do I want to live with my family? What opportunities can I create in the world that's different than I was stuck in one location? And that's a shift. So I was telling you on the last podcast, which is that you got to fire yourself sometimes from yourself. If you got to fire yourself from what you're doing to let yourself go into a future. And it may sound harsh, but it's a good way to think about what you should do if you're not happy. If you're not happy, fire yourself and see what happens. I got fired from my first company, and then I started the first startup, and then it led me here, and I got fired. Sometimes it happens to you. Sometimes you do it to yourself.
Yeah. I love that. Rob, thank you for coming on TechTables. You can find Rob on LinkedIn. That's, I think, probably the best place to connect with Rob digitally. Obviously, Rob has his own podcast, Over the Wall, which is fantastic. If you're not catching Over the Wall, that's geared towards serving and helping entrepreneurs. And actually, Rob, do you want to pitch? You probably pitch it better than me, Over the Wall. Just give a short plug for Over the Wall.
Yeah, so if you go to Over the Wall, it's on all the podcasting platforms. And I basically interview entrepreneurs and alternate actors. I did Ed Norton, the actor, and Deepak Chopra, so it's not entrepreneurs. Scott Kelly, the astronaut. And what I'm trying to do is find people that we see have been successful, or even some you may not know, but who are successful. And we get deep into the mental game, because I look at all of this as a mental game. Can you handle the stress? How do you get over the wall? Like, we all have these walls in our personal lives and our professional lives. And so the goal here is to take a bunch of learnings that I've had in my life and all these other people have had, and allow for us to learn. And then you guys can move forward without making the mistakes I made.
Yeah, mastering the mental game. Actually, slight plug is right before we leave. The high school team that I coach, I find myself using Over the Wall as like just a phrase now. Like, we've got to get over the wall. Like, it's in my head, it's in my brain. But no, there's a lot of really great episodes. I think I've probably listened to, I want to say 5 or 6, and just cranking my way through. I don't normally listen to podcasts, but very excited about Over the Wall.
Yeah, it's great. I do an episode every couple of weeks. Feel free to check in on it.
Yeah, love it. Awesome. Thanks for coming on TechTables, Rob. I appreciate it, and have a fantastic rest of the day.
Thanks, Joe. Have a good one.
Bye.
Goodbye.